the Sustaining Creativity podcast. I'm your host, Mari Riesberg. Over the past several years, I've combined my degrees with acting and somatic psychology to share my sustaining creativity techniques with performers. And now I've decided to share it with a bigger audience that includes you. I believe we are all creative, and this podcast is all about that. I'll be interviewing people from all backgrounds, ages, and creativity experiences to share just how creative we all are. Today, I'll be chatting with Emily Cherkin, former teacher, current mom, and the Screentime Consultant. Please enjoy Emily Cherkin. Welcome to the Sustaining Creativity podcast. Today, I am here with Emily Cherkin, the Screentime Consultant, former teacher, and current mom. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here.
I am super excited for you to be here and to chat with you about creativity and I imagine screen time and all the things that go into that. But before we get carried away in our creativity adventures, why don't you just take a couple of minutes and let listeners know a little bit more about who you are and what you do?
Thank you. I will. Yes. So I am the Screentime Consultant, but before that, I was a middle school teacher. And so I spent 12 years working with seventh graders. And I get a lot of, oh, wow, how was that? And I will say I loved it. I loved working with that age group. And one of the things that I noticed as I was teaching, and this was about 12 years ago, was how much technology was creeping into the classroom, and not just for academics, but primarily for social media. And it was, of course, early social media like Facebook, which no 12-year-old would be caught on today.
Right.
But it really informed me as a teacher in a different way to realize that what was normal sort of middle school stuff like FOMO and exclusion and feeling left out was now being magnified by social media. And I realized how much it was interfering with a lot of normal middle school developmental stuff. And I wanted to do something about it. So it took a couple of years, but I launched a business and I've been talking to schools and parents and students about screen time and how to manage it the last couple of years. And you can imagine the pandemic really threw a wrench in everybody's screen time. Yes. Or maybe not through a wrench, accelerated it, right? More accurate. And so, I've been very busy in a good way and trying to help find balance for myself as a parent, trying to manage remote learning, trying to work remotely, trying to connect with people through a screen. It's been challenging. It's been challenging.
Well, I'm grateful that you do the work that you do and are sharing, I imagine, really helpful tips and tools for people really struggling with screen time. I know myself, I am staring at a screen more hours a day than I would like to, and it definitely impacts me. And I can only imagine how it can impact, seventh graders or any other children.
Yes. So. Definitely.
Well, I'm super curious, again, before we dive into creativity, what are kind of if you had like 3 tips around screen time for people, what would those be?
Ooh, yeah. Let's go right there, because this is one of my favorite things. I always tell people I am not anti-technology, I'm tech intentional. Okay. And I really like that phrase because just like anything in our lives, it's about being intentional. So, I mean, I might like chocolate, but I don't eat it every meal, every day, right? I'm being intentional about when I have it and then I enjoy it more. And, technology can really be a wonderful tool. Look what we get to do right here, right? And meet across the country and do these podcast interviews. But it's also, again, a tool that we need to think about intentionally. So my favorite tip to give adults, parents, people with kids or without kids, doesn't matter. This is a great life skill tip, is to live your life out loud. And what I mean by that is to narrate what you do as you do it. So this can be when you are home alone with your cats or with a group of people, it doesn't matter. But as you're reaching for a device, you say, I'm picking up my phone. I'm going to check the weather. I want to see what I need to wear today. I'm also going to look at Instagram because I just want to check something and I'm bored. So I'm going to scroll through Twitter. And we say it out loud. And your cats, your kids, your spouse, your friends are going to roll their eyes. But there are so many benefits to this. You're modeling how you use technology. You are showing that it's a multi-tool. I always say our phones are Swiss Army knives, not switchblades, because they do multiple things.
Yeah.
And you get to talk about how it makes you feel, which is a great, if you are a parent, to have your kids hearing you say, oh, I feel so stressed out. All these notifications are distracting me. Or, I wish that Instagram didn't have a bottomless scroll because I can't stop. Like I could just watch reels all day long. I don't want to do that. So the more we can live our lives out loud, the benefit is huge for all of us. And I really love that tip because it's free, it's easy, you can start it tonight, right? And it's just like anything else we do. Like if you track what you eat, for example, you start to pay more attention to it. So just same idea. If we're paying attention to how we use it, there's a strategy. Let's see. Another really good one. I like to think about being tech intentional. And so there's some really this is a really basic, easy to do, turn off all your notifications. And people always freak out because they're like, oh my gosh, my text messages. And I say, yes. And the reason is, as you and I both just observed, how far are we from our computers and phones all day? Not very far, right? So the chances of us missing something are pretty slim. And I have had my alerts off for a couple of years and I literally never missed a text message because it's never that far away is the sad reality. So, but what happens is it doesn't make that ding or a vibrate. The light will go on, like it'll appear on my screen, but it doesn't pull me away from what I'm doing. So anytime we're in a deep focused activity, whether it's something creative, whether we're writing, being with our child, we don't get pulled away by this external notification. My husband says, texting is giving someone who's not even in the room permission to interrupt you. And we would be horrified by that, right? Like if someone were to walk up and start like talking while we were, right? So we have to think of our phones as almost doing that to us. So turning off our notifications can decrease. I mean, do we really need news alerts on our phones? The news is stressful enough. Do we really want it to alert us every time something else happens that's bad? So that is that's like, yay, mental health, yay for time to yourself. All of those things have huge benefits. So those are two really
those
big
are
tips.
Amazing. I love it. And I love hearing how much creativity really is wrapped up in both of them and that present moment awareness and focus. And there's huge amounts of mindfulness that show up too. So I love all of this and how easily it weaves into the world of creativity.
Yes, absolutely. I'm glad you made that connection too.
Absolutely. Well, so thinking about creativity, what does it mean to you to be creative?
I love this question. And I was thinking about it. So to me, creativity is having time and freedom to do something that's not structured.
Oh, I love that. That's amazing.
And I say that as like a highly structured type A person who loves lists and organization and tidiness. And what I realize is I need it to balance me out, like that intensity has got to be grounded by something. And for me, the creativity will only happen if I've given the time for it to happen. So that's what first came to mind.
I love it. I mean, I love this question because literally every person has a different answer and it's such a beautiful thing. And that's the beauty of creativity. It can mean something different to you than it does to me or the next person I interview. So
Yes. And I didn't Google it. That was just from my brain.
Yes. I love that too. Well, I imagine that in your line of work, also being a parent, having relationships, that you face some challenges some days, maybe every day. I don't know. How do you face specifically creative challenges?
Such a good question. I think for me, when I think about what I do to be creative, it looks really different from what my daughter might do, for example. So for
Right.
me, I am a big ideas person. So even though I'm very like analytical and organized, I can think about that big picture. And so I like that planning that goes with that, where I can creatively think about, well, what could this be? What could this look like?
Mhm.
And having time to write. So I find that writing for me is an outlet. And if I can sit and be in that flow where I am just like, I can just pour out onto the
Mhm.
page. And that is important. Like I have to make time for that. And I did, certainly during the pandemic and, working from home and kids at home, it
Mhm.
was really hard. I was trying to write a book.
Whew.
I
Yeah.
laugh because I knew that it wouldn't actually take me that long, but to find the time that was
Mhm.
uninterrupted where I could focus and
Yeah.
be into that flow was really challenging. So I'm here in a quiet office space where I know I'm not being interrupted right now, so if I can again be that intentional piece, like
Mhm.
making that time available so that I can dive deep into the thing I'm working on.
Nice. And
Yeah.
as you've talked, and the word intentional keeps coming up,
Yeah.
and I love that I'm making these connections right now as we're talking. This piece around intentional creativity also, of how we have to prioritize creativity in our life like we would prioritize setting our phone down or getting off of a screen, and those pieces. Yeah.
That's a really good point. Yeah. And again, it's funny because I think sometimes I'm like, well, because I'm this analytical, highly organized person, I'm not like, people don't look at me as a creative type, right? Like that somehow I even box myself into that. And I don't think that's accurate. And I don't think and so actually I think it's my form of resistance, is like to make sure, like I'm going to structure my day so that creativity is in there, even if
Yeah.
in the act of structuring it I'm being my like analytical organized self.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's the beauty of creativity. It looks so different for each of us. It's not always performing. Sometimes it's, putting on a favorite hat or your favorite glasses or something of that nature, and that's your creative expression. So
Yeah.
you can be the type A, organized, analytical human that you are,
Yes,
and imbue that experience with creativity too.
absolutely. And I my daughter is actually homeschooled for a
Mhm.
variety of reasons. We decided to do that in November of 2019,
Oh.
ironically, right before everybody went home. Um, and one of the things in one of the books I had read about, homeschooling and learning in a different way and just how brains work was just this idea that like the people who are highly academic and successful are often the ones who have high amounts of creativity in their life, right? Like
Mhm.
that there's this beautiful balance between you can be that like Nobel Prize winning scientist brain, but you
Yeah.
also might be a cellist, or you might be like
Yeah.
a sculptor, or you might be a comedian, right? And that
Mhm.
there's something about tapping into all of that. That's how I see working with my daughter, who, I mean, we are so different in so many ways, but to
Mhm.
witness her, like, I mean, I would describe her as a highly creative person, but she
Mhm.
manifests it in a completely different
Yeah.
way than I do, right? And
Yeah.
I find that really inspiring to see
Mm.
how she moves through the world in her own way.
Mhm.
And I want to be more like that, like it makes
Oh.
me want to do, I'm like, just having moments where you could stop all of the planning and the list making and all that and just be in the
Mm.
game or in the book or in the art project. Like
Yeah.
that's admirable.
I love that. I mean, th- there was a study that a gentleman, George Land, did for NASA. I'm not going to remember when he did it, but it was a study about creativity, and he interviewed or studied 5-year-olds. 98% of them ranked creative genius. And then
Oh,
he studied them again 5 years and then at 15. And in the span of 10 years, the percentage went from 98 to like 30. And then he did a big study of adults, like 200,000 adults, and only 2% of adults score in that creative genius range.
that's heartbreaking. And I, as a former teacher, I say this as much as I respect education and teaching.
Mm-hmm.
I really think schools kill creativity. And I should say traditional school models. There are
Yeah.
certainly exceptions to that, but it is one reason school did not work for my daughter. And
Mm-hmm.
I feel that unfortunately, and here's where we merge back to technology,
Mm-hmm.
it's a perfect storm because pre-COVID, tech was climbing into the classroom. I mean, those
Yeah.
tech companies know they have a market here.
Mm-hmm.
And there are a few very specific ways that tech in the classroom can be wonderful. And
Mm-hmm.
I'm being, again, incredibly specific,
Yeah.
incredibly intentional about that.
Mm-hmm.
However, you then dump all this money for remote learning and laptops and apps to help teachers. And what did we do? We just put kids on screens for 6 hours. And we know, I know that spending time on our laptop is not going to enhance the creative parts of our life. And
Right.
again, I know there are certain exceptions to this, but for the most
Mm-hmm.
part, the last thing children need to do is sit down and be doing computer-based work. I mean, we're turning them into little office workers, and
Yeah.
that's so depressing. That's just it makes me so sad, and I feel like that I feel very lucky. I feel
Mm-hmm.
like we've saved my daughter in many ways
Mm.
because I think that percentage for her was plummeting where
Yeah.
she was, and I think she's going to change the world because of her creativity.
Mm.
And so,
Yeah.
any opportunity we can get in there to stop that,
Right. Yeah. And
that's so important.
it's a creative solution,
Yes.
recognizing that there is a challenge and how do you creatively work with it and solve it. And it
Yeah.
sounds like your version was homeschooling in that space. And yeah.
Well, and I recognize not everyone can do that or has the
Mm-hmm.
resources or the time. And I will be the first to say I've been creative in my homeschooling because I've been
Yeah.
outsourcing to there are wonderful homeschool programs where I live. And so we've been putting together our own version of school. It looks
Mm-hmm.
different, but it meets her needs and meets the state requirements and all of
Right.
that. But I it really is sad to me. A lot of parents, I hear this a lot from parents, that, oh, well, my kid uses social media to be creative. It's content creation, right? They use
Mm-hmm.
that word.
Yeah.
And I have some colleagues who are high school teachers, and they were like, they've done a bunch of research, and they were looking at, I think there's one of the studies, I believe this is from Common Sense Media, says something about like only 2% of the time that kids spend on their devices is actually spent in creative
Mm-hmm.
productive content creation. And I believe that because it's
Yeah.
not designed. I mean, yes, there are apps and platforms where we can be creative online, but for the most part, we're just distracted from one thing to another. They're designed to hold our attention. And
Mm-hmm.
especially for young people where social interactions are so important
Yeah.
that that's going to pull them away from any sort of independent creation. And again, I know there's exceptions to this, but
Sure.
unfortunately, that is what I see. I don't,
Mm-hmm.
I worry that schools might be killing creativity and technology might be killing creativity. And also, I see boredom as the birthplace of creativity.
Mm.
And what
Yeah.
we do is overschedule kids and we give them
Mm-hmm.
things to fill their days. And what they need is time and freedom, like I said at the beginning, to be in an unstructured environment where they make their fun, where they learn
Mm-hmm.
how to self regulate. And that is
Absolutely.
different today.
It is. If you've never seen Sir Ken
Oh,
Robinson's TED
love
Talk,
him, love
yes,
him, love
highly
him.
recommend watching that. If
Yep.
you have any questions about why schools kill creativity,
Yes.
it's a
I'm
great.
really glad you mentioned that because it's not just my line. And he's like, it's
Yes,
like one of the most watched TED Talks ever, too.
it is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I agree. And he's right. I mean, and I feel like I've witnessed it as a parent and as an educator and as a
Mm-hmm.
Screentime consultant,
Yeah.
and it's, again, I think the skills we use screens so much and so often and so early that we're
Mm-hmm.
displacing some really important skills that need to happen first. And
Mm-hmm.
one of those skills is boredom/creativity, because I see them as the same side of the
Right.
coin. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And that's so interesting. Boredom and creativity really, they go hand in hand.
Yeah.
It's that
Yeah. Those
you,
shower ideas, that you're like, oh,
yeah.
I have this great idea in the shower.
Or washing dishes or like doing
Yes.
a task you don't actually have to think that much about. Yeah,
Yes.
exactly. I
Absolutely.
love it. Well, I'm going to take a big left turn and ask you
Okay.
about your earliest memory of being creative.
I love this question too. I was thinking about it because even again, though I'm this like highly analytical, organized person now, I spend hours in imaginative play as a kid,
Mm.
like dress up. Of course, we played school all the time. And of course, I was the teacher. I was the oldest sister. But I have a wonderful aunt who is just one of the most creative people. I mean, in all areas, music, theater, drama, humor, art, just so lovely. And she actually runs an arts-based preschool that I sent my kids to. And to this day, my kids are 10 and 13 now. I just credit those couple years they spent there in this high quality, creative based, arts based preschool as their ability to think about the world in a different way.
Mm-hmm.
So I grew up thankfully with an aunt like that, and my parents were very supportive of it. I actually really think that reading books, my parents really prioritized that, and so much of my imaginative play came from the books that I read. So I feel really like those are some of my earliest memories, is just dress up and playing outside and making pine cone stew,
Yes. Yeah. Oh my
and
gosh. I
doing those
remember
kinds
doing
of
that
things.
too as a kid.
Yes, right? It was delicious.
Yeah,
It
it
was
was.
delicious.
The weirder, the better.
Oh, totally. Totally. And like letting myself putting myself into the world of the books that I read, but
Mm-hmm.
also I think we underestimate play for children as a way of processing the
Yeah.
world. And I know right now, as COVID is not gone, but changing,
Mm-hmm.
kids have a lot of processing to do. My 10-year-old said, I don't even remember what it was like to go to school or to a program without a mask,
Yeah.
and it's just this, I think we don't really think about, well, I've been just very struck by how much kids are going to have to process. And so to me,
Mm-hmm.
that's even more of an argument for giving them that space and freedom and time
Yeah.
to be creative so they can process
Yeah.
it.
Process and integrate all of the things that are going on. It makes a lot of sense. Are there
Yes.
any things that you did as a kid that you want to do again as an adult to have more creativity in your life?
Oh, that's such a good question. Parenting forced me to be more creative in a
Okay.
good way.
Mm-hmm.
And having two kids who are completely different
Yeah.
forced it even more. And I think because I had to remember how to play,
Mm-hmm.
that reminder to like be silly and not like be trying to organize the dress up clothes while my daughter wanted me to play, it was like,
Yeah.
no, just put them on and go with it,
Yeah.
is a reminder that like, I need that too.
Mm.
And I need to not rush her time. Like if I think what you asked about my child, like how important that was to me, like I need to
Mm-hmm.
let that be important for her.
Mm-hmm.
But that's such a, I don't do dress up anymore. Perhaps that's not it. But like I think it probably shows up in little ways, like a
Yeah.
handwritten note, or
Mm.
how I hang my pictures, like just
Mm-hmm.
little things, or what I collect, like I like to pick up like rocks on the beach, like those kinds of
Yeah.
things that bring it. I guess they're sort of touch points for those moments.
Mm-hmm.
And writing, I mean, for me, writing
Yeah.
is a medium for that.
Nice. Yeah. I just
Yeah.
think that's we forget the things that brought us joy or happiness as a kid. And for some reason, as adults, we tell ourselves, I can't do it anymore. And
No.
how can we start to incorporate more of it? Or where do we
Yeah,
start to use it more in our adult life as well? So, yeah.
absolutely. No, I think that's so important. And I think it's, I had a parent educator colleague say once, we make adulthood seem so boring and miserable to children. And so if we can remember to show them that it's not all boredom and misery, that it's like fun, and we
Mm-hmm.
can be silly, and there's privileges that come with adulthood, like we want, we don't, I mean, what a miserable, why would you want childhood to end, right? Like it's
Right.
just, and then of course, in my opinion, we sort of like did that top down, childhoods ended earlier, just shove all
Mm-hmm.
these computers into their faces at younger ages. Like
Yeah.
and it needs to go the opposite way. I mean, I think the silver lining of the pandemic is that parents maybe kind of saw behind the curtain a little more about the role that tech is playing in our lives, and realizing that there's this huge spectrum of that, and trying to maybe be more discerning about what we want and what we don't want. But it's challenging, and it's challenging for us as adults, right?
Oh, yeah. No, it's so easy to lose hours in a phone or on a computer, the rabbit holes of research or trying to figure something else out. Yeah.
I mean, there's a great line by Mitch Kapor that says, trying to get information from the internet is like trying to take a drink of water from a fire hose.
Oh my gosh. Yes.
It's exactly that. Like, you'll find what you want, but you'll find everything else too. And, how do we, for ourselves, also filter that, like block some of that water?
Oh my goodness. Yeah. No, I think that's a great image too. Like trying to take a drink out of a fire hose for sure.
Yeah.
So how would you encourage someone who doesn't think they're creative to find creativity in their life?
I might ask the question a little differently. Like, what is it, if you had a day or an hour of time and you couldn't do something that was on your to-do list, like that was productive, what would you choose to do? Because I think people might not say like, well, reading a book isn't creative, but it might be. It might lead to something, like it might spark ideas. Like so. And again, if I go back to what you asked me at the very beginning about time and freedom as my definition of creativity, then, what would we do? What would you do in your life to find time and freedom? And if you had it, what would you do with that time and freedom? And, I don't know. I mean, I like organizing, big surprise here, organizing closets or, my pantry or something. I get a lot of pleasure out of that. And I can just sort of zone out and find beauty in the art of organizing a closet. So,
oh yeah,
maybe that's not painting a portrait or sculpting a sculpture, but it's me doing something that I enjoy that doesn't have constraints or expectations around it.
Yeah. I mean, I think you bring in a great component of creativity, that everyday creativity is just as valuable as performative creativity, and organizing a closet can bring you just as much joy as someone who wrote a piece of music and performs it. There's
exactly. Yes, that's such a good
limit
it. Yeah. No, I love that. And it is, I think sometimes too, at least for me and people like me, like we think, okay, we got to reinvent this whole system, and I got to build in creativity time, and I got to like do all this, planning for it. And I think the spontaneity piece is really important too. And this is that like double-edged sword of social media for me, is like, I mean, I hate the irony of needing social media to reach a community of people to talk about screen time is like ridiculous.
It's not lost on you, I'm sure.
It's not lost on me, not at all. I will admit, I don't love it, but I'm seeing ways in which I can be creative with it. And again, I put like a giant asterisk by that. I'm 43. I'm not saying you should let your 10-year-old do this, right? Like there are big differences. I'm using it to promote my work, but if I can put a little bit of myself into it and make people feel less pressure to be so perfect and to be so this and have their life together. Because again, I mean, as the Screentime Consultant, I am guilty of using my screens too much. I am a parent who fights with my kids about screen time. Like I'm not exempt from these problems just because I know a lot about them.
Right.
We talk about it a lot in my house.
I bet you do. Yeah.
My poor kids. I know my son the other day said, wanted to play video games on a school night. And generally we just have a rule. We just don't do it on school nights because it takes away all the fighting. And he gets time on the weekends. And he was like, oh, well, because you're only my mom hates screen time on the weeknights. And I was like, yeah, but if I were a nutritionist, you'd be hearing a lot more about vegetables. And that's this is my thing.
I love it. But yeah, I mean, it makes sense. And there's so much room for creativity in all of the things, how we do it. It sounds like you have that intentional aspect of using screens for a specific purpose, which helps in the limiting of it. Yeah. At least that's what I'm hearing from you when you were talking.
Yeah, absolutely. And I notice, and again, because I try to walk my walk as much as I talk my talk. It's, I notice when I wake up in the morning and I look at Twitter first, I'm in a bad mood.
Yeah.
Immediately, and so then it's like, okay, well, I knew that was going to happen, but I did it anyway. So what can I do?
Right.
And a couple of other easy practical tips. Don't put your phone in your bedroom. Put it in the other room, so the first thing you do, do you roll and scroll is what I like to say. It's like, if you roll and scroll, you are going to wake up grumpy and stressed out and comparing yourself and hearing bad news and, or maybe you get up and take your shower first and then you look at your news, right? Like, again, small intentional tweaks that make a big difference and affect your mood and then affect the mood of those around you, right? Because
absolutely.
Our people now.
You get to incorporate creativity into it as well, making those choices from that. Okay, I'm going to get a little creative with my rolling and scrolling today.
Right. Ooh, I was just thinking of that. Do you know that like elf on the shelf thing that people do for the holidays?
Yeah.
It's like, I wonder if you do that with your phone. Here's creativity. I'm like,
yes.
Wonder if you like hide your phone in a different place every night.
Oh my gosh, that would be amazing and super fun.
Exactly.
That's hilarious.
I could see there being some downsides and challenges, but again, like we can't take ourselves too seriously either. Like I think it's more fun to be fun, and I can be very serious, and I think that is something I work hard at. I'm not always the fun parent, and it's easy to feel guilty about that, but I try. And I think pulling my kids out of school and spending that time with her has really forced me to say, going to a botanical garden or a museum counts as school, and it's fun for both of us. And it's a thing we get to do together and build a relationship. And all of that is foundational to successful screen time management. I mean, that's it. Like it one leads to the other so directly in my brain. So
I love it. This has been such a treat to chat with you about screen time and creativity. I just have one more question.
Yes.
What does it feel like in your body to be creative?
I love that, because that's requiring me to pay attention to my body too, right? And that's something I like to separate my brain. At peace is probably what I would say, like, and there's a certain amount of like confidence, I think, that comes when I can there's no judgment, there's no opinion, that I get to just dive into something I'm passionate about, and I think this has really been helpful actually to help me think about how I think about creativity. Like I'm gonna keep thinking about this, but that's my answer.
I love that. That's so good. I know when you like cross your arms and touch your shoulders. I love this question. It's so much fun to have people answer it. But it has been so fantastic chatting with you.
Thank you.
People want to learn more about the Screentime Consultant and all the things that you do, how could they go about doing that?
Yeah, thank you. I mean, again, the irony is not lost on me that I am on social media. So you can find me on Instagram and Facebook. I post mostly in those two places. I'm on LinkedIn and Twitter, and there's and a YouTube channel as well, but it probably starts with the Instagram, Facebook. And then I have a website, which is thescreentimeconsultant.com, which turned out to be a really great domain name because I get a lot of searches from Google, actually, people typing in, I need a screen time consultant, and then they find me. So that is there. And I'm actually going to be launching a course in February to help. It's called the Tech Intentional Parent. So kind of helping parents get some strategies under their belt to move into the digital age and parenting kids, but with a tech intentional mindset. Because again, I keep saying this, it's all about being intentional.
Yeah. I love it. Well, I will put all of this information in the show notes so people can easily find you. And thank you again for taking the time to chat with me. It's been awesome.
Thank you, Mari. Thank you so much for having me. I'm glad we connected.
Me too. Thanks for listening to the Sustaining Creativity Podcast. We'd love to keep in touch, so follow us on Facebook and Instagram. We are at Sustaining Creativity. Make sure to subscribe to the podcast wherever you listen to podcasts. Tag your friends and family so they can listen too. We love to hear from you, so leave your reviews, comments, and questions. Check out our website, sustainingcreativity.com, for upcoming offerings and creativity coaching. Tune in Tuesdays for our next episode. And remember, with creativity, anything's possible.